This basically sets the game to happening to me. Korean rating. This basically sets the game to run in the Korean rating version of the game, but you don't have to change your game language to Korean. What this does is it deletes dead bodies from your game. I used to play without this because I thought that dead bodies were valuable information, but what ended up happening to me in a real competition is I saw a dead body rolling down a hill. I thought it was an alive guy. I called him out to my team, and then we made a bad play and we lost a game, and it actually cost us it was in the weekly survival, grand survival thing, so it cost us big time and I was pretty upset. So from then on, always Korean rating in every tournament. It's very helpful. Basically, if you see something, you shoot it. It's very quick and easy. To access this, you just right click your game, click properties, and then type in here -Korean rating, no spaces. I also have my Steam overlay disabled because I just assume that it's gonna somehow impact my FPS if I have an overlay on. So yeah, even though the effect of it is minimal, I'm skeptical. If I'm trying to squeeze out all the drops of FPS I can get, then I'm gonna disable that. All right, so now that we're in PUBG, we can open up our settings. This is where the fun begins. So I have recently switched to 1728 by 1080p. I made a prior video explaining why I thought 1920 was better, but honestly, after a lot of revision, I think 1728 is better for competition play. This is basically because the lower render quality at the same distance. Like if you play 1920 and you play 1728 will still have that potato quality render, even if you're standing the same distance away from an object on 1920. So it affects the way that like trees render, buildings render at the same distance, and it kind of gives you a graphical advantage in that you can see through some objects. Or it's also just very visually simple. It doesn't help with recoil in any way, shape or form. And honestly, I think it's a detriment to things like DMRs, but it's definitely helpful when it comes to spotting enemies. And that's honestly the most important thing. So yeah, 1728 by 1080, I've been running that. Alternatively, you could run 1920 by 1200. That is also a 1610 res. I prefer 1728. I think the image quality is just sharper. Secondly, if you have a 1440p monitor, the equivalent resolution for you that you'll make in your NVIDIA control panel is 2304 by 1440. So yeah, if you have a 1440p monitor, make sure you run that, 2304 by 4. I just have my in-game FPS. FPS cap unlimited because I like high FPS. Some pro players like to limit their FPS, but I don't think it's very intelligent. I mean, if I'm in a competition, I want the most FPS at any given moment. I know some people limit their FPS around like 130 because that's what they average in comp, and then they practice. I just don't think it's worth it. In late game circles in comp, you can actually get really good FPS, upwards of 200. Brightness I run 100 of because I think that it just gives me the clearest image. I've experimented with brightness a lot, and I just always find myself going back to 100. The way that this game works is the middle of your screen is actually the brightest, and it gets darker like radially. So the edges of your screen, the corners of your screen are substantially darker than the middle. It's kind of weird in that regard, but I find that running 100 brightness negates that effect a lot, that VIG. So always on 100 brightness for me. Moving into the advanced settings, it's very simple. I'm a very simple guy. Literally everything very low. I've experimented with things like textures on medium. This is good because it makes grass thin. So if you're ridge peaking on a wrangle, you can see through the grass very easily. But I just always find myself coming back to very low again, because I find that there's a tiny amount of input lag when I run medium. It's noticeable to me. And secondly, I am way better at reacting fast to things if it's visually simple. So when I have very low textures, if I have a wall and a player standing in front of it, that player will contrast really well and I can react to them, especially. So when I have very low textures, wrangle, you can see through the grass very easily, but I just always find myself coming back to very low again, because if it's visually simple, and I'm not able to react as fast as I'm surprised if you see me trying that out soon. Yeah, for now, just very low. You may see some of the Chinese pro players running medium or high view distance. I believe that this is because it makes guns spawn in faster while you're parachuting. So if you're in a hot drop and you're parachuting towards school and the gun doesn't render in for like an extra 2 seconds after you land, you're gonna die. They run higher view distance while they're playing public games, I believe, so that those hot drops, they can get the gun first. I think running pretty much any other setting is a detriment to your FPS. You can make the game look pretty smooth without having to turn anti-aliasing on, because anti-aliasing will give you a decent performance hit. So yeah, I would just recommend everything very low and then only adjust your textures, if anything at all. Rather than adjusting sharpening game, you're better off adjusting the sharpness on your monitor, because sharpening game actually takes up some graphics performance, I believe. When I was running it for like a year and then I eventually turned it off, I felt like my FPS and input lag was immediately better. And that's just my experience. I'm not 1000% sure of the stats, but I'm 99% sure that it disabled is best. I run quite high sharpness on my monitor to compensate. I also think it helps you see people through smokes a little bit. Like if someone's on the edge of a smoke, if you have a really sharp game, it makes them contrast well. So definitely a big fan of having a sharp game. I just would not recommend using sharpening game. And then DirectX 11 mode, I just have it on enhanced for the best FPS. I think that's pretty much standard. Everyone's going to be running DirectX 11 enhanced. My FOV is 95 at the moment, but this actually bounces around a lot. I change it like every other day, depending on my feel. Coming up on tournament time, I'm gonna have to set it on something and forget, fire and forget. And it's funny because when I play public games, I think 95 is optimal, and I'm in those hot drops, I'm in those CQC situations. It's really important that I can flick around and be aware of the sides of my screen. But I think that when it comes to competition play, 90 FOV is actually optimal. It's more about spotting people who are ridge peaking, spotting people far away, reacting to people quickly, and 90 FOV really helps me achieve that. So come tournament time, I will definitely be on 90 FOV. But yeah, I like pubbing on 95. Honestly, if I didn't play tournaments, I'd probably play 103 all the time just because it looks fancy. It's a good time. If you play native res, it's obviously way easier to spot people, so you can play with higher FOV. You can play 97, 98. That's completely up to you. But yeah, if you play native res, don't feel afraid of turning, which is audio. This is mostly preference. I actually prefer to have a quieter game because I think that you get shot at and it's really loud. Instinctually as a human, loud things scare us, you know. I think that that is going to inhibit my ability to make the most important decision in that moment. And the crosshair will go setting. I have these nice earbuds for the noise cancellation for LAN, but I wouldn't recommend actually getting very expensive loud game to hear footsteps well. Those two things are super important for me. I do have quite nice earbuds, but honestly, there are earbuds that you can get out there for $60, $80, just as good in a home setting. I have these nice earbuds for the noise cancellation for LAN, but I wouldn't recommend actually getting very expensive earbuds just to play online. Unless you're actually going to play in a tournament or a very loud setting, I would always recommend you don't splash out any mouse. And he told me to turn it off, and his reasoning sounded very solid. And I trusted him and I turned it off for like a couple days and I couldn't tell where anything was happening. It was extremely difficult. And I turned it back on and life became easy again. I would highly recommend it. It practically simulates 3D audio, so you can tell when you're in an apartment which floor a player is on, or if they're shooting above or below you. It basically just really helps those city fight situations. I would always recommend you keep this setting enabled. I've played see the drip, gotta let them know. New viewers come in, they're like, what's this guy wearing? I got big drip. It is what it is. So enable, but come tournament time, I do disable this because this will destroy your FPS. When you open your inventory, if that is enabled, your game probably loses 50 FPS. If you're really trying hard, sweating balls, disabled every time. I'll actually apply that now because I played this weekend. Colorblind mode. This is interesting. Colorblind mode is interesting because with Korean rating, the blood color doesn't change. So really this comes down to which crosshair color you prefer on your DMRs and AR. In my experience, the normal colorblind mode actually has the best contrast. The red crosshair, I generally find that I will lose my blue crosshair, especially on the 4X in the sky or in smokes, and it's way harder to aim than with the normal. So I'm a big fan of the normal. When it comes to crosshair color, I use green. Basically, I read somewhere that green is the #1 color that stands out in our brain. Apparently we see it faster and we see it well. It's like the color that our brain is most receptive to. So I just run a green crosshair, all green crosshair, just so I can never lose track of it really. I don't find it blends in with the Erangel green, to be honest. It actually stands out pretty well. Obviously preference though. Weapon slot HUD, you want this to be enabled because it basically lets you know which grenade you have in slot next to the minimap. Minimap dynamic zoom I actually keep disabled. This is so that when I'm parachuting into a place like school or hacienda, and I know that the edge of the minimap is 200 meters away from me, I can accurately parachute consistently. Because I know that from when I pull my parachute to when I land, if it's a level floor, it's about 200 meters. So I can put things at like 180 meters on my minimap and then land on it consistently. And that's actually how I parachute so well a lot of the time, is I wait until I mark where I want to land, I'm parachuting in, I see the marker on the minimap is about 160 meters away from me, 180 meters, and then I just full shift down. That's why I keep the minimap dynamic zoom disabled, so I can have a consistent parachute strategy, and I would recommend you guys do the same. There is not a lot to be gained from using this. If you want a bigger minimap, you should bind the extended minimap to a accessible key. I use 6. Kill feed limit, you want this to be 10 because I mean you don't want to miss anything in the kill feed. Most important thing in the game. Honestly, it makes or breaks games, and in scrims there's times where you will see 10 kills in the kill feed. It's hard to read them all, but there's no reason to not have this on 10. Interaction target highlight is an interesting setting. I actually really enjoy it because it helps you see things through smoke. Like if I am on a car or something, or gonna pick up a gun, looking at something on the floor, I can see the highlight through smokes. And this is actually important because it helps you identify exactly how like a car can be positioned. If I'm standing inside a smoke and I'm looking at a car, I can see the outline of the car roughly a little bit better, and I can gauge my position relative to the car pretty okay. So I think there's no real reason to have this disabled. It's easy turn on. Compass background, who cares? On-screen key guide, obviously disabled. Get that shit out of here. Oh my God, that is the most annoying thing. If I see anyone playing, like I tune into a Twitch stream and I see that thing on, I'm like, this must be their first day. The loot flash effect, I just run glow, default, same as 2018. It's just what I'm used to. No real difference here. I find it hard to differentiate ammo types if it's on the pulse mode, so I just keep it on glow. In function, there's not really a lot to go over here. Free look interpolation, you should set to disable. By default, it's on enabled, and you want to disable it every time. Basically what it does is when you alt look to the right or to the left, if you let go of alt, your aim will snap back straight. If it's enabled, your aim will slowly glide back straight. Meaning that if you're alt looking and you spot someone and then you let go of alt, your aim will go, and then you can shoot at them, right? Compared to just snap, snap. So it just basically cuts out some of that animation time, and just leaving that disabled is ideal. Everything else is very easy. Auto reload enable, and then just full auto for everything. So you never have a situation in a hot drop where you have to change your just auto replacing attachments here so that you can switch settings, all three of these, to enable so that you can easily switch out weapons, especially in hot drop situations. It's just very handy. And then everything else doesn't really matter except these bottom three. Additional action queuing basically cuts out some animation time and makes sure that enable. It was bugged for a while where your guns would just randomly start shooting, but I believe that's fixed. I haven't had any issues for a while, so I definitely would recommend it to be enabled. Highlight recommended ammo and equipment, I would 100% recommend to be on. This is because I'm scrimming all the time and I'm running around, I'm looting. I see a first aid kit. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go loot that. I run up to it and there's a flash hider inside it. There's an 8X inside of it. There's something inside of it that I would never have seen, because that's how PUBG works. It just spawns things inside of each other. You know, I would highly recommend to have this enabled. There's no reason to not have it on. So those are my PUBG settings, guys.